Hey, Patrick, how you doing, bud?
Not too bad at all. You have a new story from your neck of the woods, as they say.
More an ongoing story. There seems to be a bit of corruption on the west coast of the United States. California seems to be a place where that's going on a lot. And Representative Kiley from the 3rd District in California has got something to say about it.
There seems to be a bit of corruption all over the United States at the moment, according to most headlines. Seems to be a bit of a leaky ship, as they say.
A bit of Minnesota, a bit of New York, a bit of Seattle, Washington.
A bit of Washington. Don't forget Washington there as well. Okay. There, yeah. There's a bit in the White House. You know, it's kind of all over the place, really, at this stage, really, isn't it?
You're not just spreading it. So
yeah.
This has to do with during COVID, an ongoing investigation about the EDD, the Employment Division in the state of California, and some of the things that went on with that. So, but we'll let him get cooking here.
On the House floor, Congressman Kevin Kiley lays out how California lost at least $32 billion in unemployment fraud, and why audits say the losses never fully stop.
Mr. Speaker, I want to take a moment this morning to examine the biggest fraud scandal in the history of California and probably in the history of the United States. And that was the fraud in unemployment benefits that occurred in California during the COVID years, amounting to a minimum of $32 billion.
That's billion with a B. $32 billion, right? So California has approximately 40 million residents, and that was $32 billion of graft, on top of the fact that we pay 13 to 15% of a state income tax as well.
I presume that was over the course 6 or 7 years, is it?
He'll go over it. It's 4 to 5, I believe. But it starts in 2020, and it didn't really alleviate until about 2024, early 24. So 4 to 5 years.
Right. Okay.
So, but it's an ongoing thing, and there was a lot of local type authorities in counties that were like, "Hey, this is a problem." Here we go.
Right.
$32 billion. Now, it's easy to kind of throw these numbers around and lose sight of what they really mean. So just to put that in perspective, that was half of the education budget in California at the time. It's more than the entire state budget of the vast majority of states in the country.
So the amount of graft that happened in the state of California exceeded other states' entire budgets. Right? Yeah. And not just like Wyoming with just under 1 million inhabitants, but Kansas and Oklahoma, some of the states with the lower populations, right?
Okay. Wow.
Now, the reason that this scandal bears scrutiny right now is threefold. First, a state audit just found 2 weeks ago that this unemployment fraud in California is ongoing to this day, continuing to cost taxpayers billions of dollars. Second, the Senate still has not passed a bill that we passed in the House to hold some of these fraudsters accountable by extending the statute of limitations. And third, the Newsom administration, perhaps sensing the political peril following the events in Minnesota, has come out and absurdly tried to deny responsibility for this scheme, for this scandal, and even more absurdly tried to blame the federal government for it. So
the federal government has no oversight in the state's employment benefits, right? So for any state administration to say the federal government is somehow to blame for any of these things is obtuse on its face. It's not accurate or correct, right?
They're not. They basically don't. Yeah. Okay. That's interesting. What is he? Is there going to be an investigation to this, or is he just bring this up on the House floor?
There is an ongoing investigation, but they're going to have to extend the statute of limitations because the graft is so big and the problem is so large. You're going to need more time to get all the facts and get all the evidentiary value type things out of the way for discovery and all the things they're going to have to do. It's just going to take time.
Because there was a time limit to bring a case forward for anything like this, isn't there? I think it's 4 to 5 years.
It depends on the crime. It depends on the crime. They all have different ones. I don't know specifically in this case what it is. but he has more things to say about it.
I want to go through exactly what happened because I believe it is important to show why taxpayers were so thoroughly defrauded and to assure that this does not continue to happen going forward. The reality is that the fraud that occurred in California took place despite the repeated warnings of the federal government. And it was uncovered not by state officials, but rather by local prosecutors. On November 23rd of 2020, county prosecutors, a group of 9 of them, disclosed what they called the most serious fraud, significant fraud of taxpayer funds in California history. Now, at the time, they said they could only prove $1 billion. So $1 billion was already the biggest fraud of taxpayer dollars in California history.
So that's from November of 2020, and push forward to today, it's 32. So it is.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty massive.
Now we know
that
it was at the
crazy.
very least 32 billion.
No, understand, he said at the very least. So they have receipts for 32 billion. Their investigation isn't done. There's more to
32
find.
billion. By the way, 32 billion out of a total of what budget? How much of the budget overall? Do you know?
I'm gonna have to look that up, but the budget is pretty massive. So we have education on the top, and then we have the Department of Corrections, and then we have the EDD, I believe, in order 1, 2, 3.
Yeah.
Right.
So would you say is about a 10% leakage or 5% leakage in the budget?
I don't know. I will look it up though.
Yeah.
Contrary
that would be
to
interesting.
what the Newsom administration is trying to say now, at the time, the district attorney of Sacramento County, Anne Marie Schubert, said, quote, "We have asked and implored the governor to turn the spigot off." She said the governor's unemployment development office was not doing common sense things like checking claims with prison rolls, something that the vast majority of other states were doing and that the federal government had advised.
Right. So a lot of individuals who resided in prison were actually getting thousands upon thousands of dollars, $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 put on their books. And that's a term that means that they had access to those funds. Now, there's a restricted amount that an inmate who is incarcerated in CDCR can have. So the money would show up on their books and then it would just leave, right? Because it was over X amount of dollars. We'll just say it's $300, right? So if they get $6,000 and then $5,700 is on top of that, then it goes away, right?
Yeah.
Now, the state will take it away unless someone else can get a hold of it first, right? So it's kind of an interesting dilemma. And
it's interesting that they managed to get around that type of system.
Right. California's total expected state budget for 2025-2026 is approximately $321 billion.
Right.
Right. So there you go.
So over the course of 5 years, we're just going around it. They lost about 6.5 billion in fraud, according to these figures. So,
right. And in total, at this point, it would be 10% of the current budget. That's a lot of leakage for a state who's
it seems an overly large leakage compared to most systems.
Yeah, it's massive.
Wow.
And somehow we decided not to protect ourselves against it. So here we go.
She said this made the scheme, quote, relatively easy. She called the governor's response slow and non-existent. She advised Governor Newsom to, quote, look to other states for solutions.
Right. So CDCR headquarters, and there are also 2 prisons located in the county of Sacramento. Possibly 3. I think it's 3. Depends on where Mule Creek State Prison is. So So Folsom Prison and California State Prison, Sacramento County, are both in the county, and that's the county for which that DA was working. Right.
So this is how they lost roughly about 5 to 6% of their budget every year through fraud.
Yes.
There's one counting. Yeah. Wow.
It's pretty bad.
That's a massive loss. And are these true figures? Or are they being
as in November of 2020
blown up? Are they being blown up for headlines?
So in November 2020, they had $1 billion on paper with receipts of fraud. He's going to tell you some of the
1
ways he did
billion.
it too.
1 billion out of, you were saying the normal state budget is about 100 odd billion, isn't it? It's over 100 billion.
300 billion. 300 billion for the entire state budget, right?
300 billion. So they're losing. They were saying on books they lost 1 billion, which is 0.15% of their budget was lost to fraud.
0.33%. But the problem is that that's what they can show receipts for in 2020. Now it's 32 billion with more receipts coming.
Because normally with most state budgets, people don't realize is what I'm getting to is usually 2 to 3% of most of your state budget will be wasted in some form, either into fraud,
right,
incompetence, so on. You're going to lose that much in your state budget.
Mm-hmm.
People have to accept that you're always going to lose a certain amount of leakage.
Yes.
Usually, as I was saying, it's between 2 to 3% roughly of your state budget.
But it's 10% and it's one department, right?
Yeah, they're saying
that there's
10%.
a ton of others, right? So this is just one department has failed at 10%. If there's no leakage from any other department in the state, then that's still 10%. But every place is going to have some leakage. Yeah, it's going to be pretty.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. If you add it all up, it's going to be roughly about 6 billion a year, roughly, I would say.
Yep.
And judging by the way they burn through cash over there, I would say it'd be as high as 10%, all right, because a lot of it is not just down to fraud, but just sheer incompetence by the looks of it.
Right, and the system's being targeted, and they didn't protect themselves, and he'll discuss that.
But you have to admit though, a lot of other state budgets are probably, if you start looking at their books, would roughly have the same leakage as well. There's no such thing as 100%.
I don't think quite as high as California though, but California has the added benefit of a massive state income tax, like personal income tax. So it's 13 to 15%. We're losing on. I presume if you looked at their closest neighbors, say Texas and so on, I presume they'll have roughly around the same leakage. They probably wouldn't make the headlines as much as California, but they would probably have the same amount of leakage. You know, Texas isn't a close neighbor. There's 2 states between us, and those states are massive, right?
Yeah, I'm just saying. If you look at all your neighbors around you, your different states.
Well, you could fit multiple Irelands between California and Texas. How about that?
But the point I'm getting to is the reason why California's leakage always seems to make the headlines is because it's a democratic state. But if you looked at the books of most other states in the union, they'll probably have the same amount of leakage as well.
They're going to have.
It's just
but I don't think it would be on this scale and done this way.
Right? I think if you look at them, a lot of them would be pretty brazen as well.
Like
I just think it does. There's Minnesota. You also have to look at likes of all the different shady deals within in Florida over the couple of decades. Every state is not squeaky clean, as they say. They all have a bit of corruption going on, a bit of graft, as they say.
Yep, brown envelopes are flowing. Here we go.
Yeah.
The district attorney of Fresno County, Lisa Smitkamp, said that Newsom, quote, did nothing until the elected district attorneys brought it to the media, adding that she did not think the state has a handle on it. Those were comments made back in November of 2020. The following January, the state auditor came out with a report that laid forward in very precise detail exactly how significant the failures of the Newsom administration were, specifically with their unemployment office known as the EDD. A heading in that audit said, quote, significant weaknesses in EDD's approach to fraud prevention have led to billions of dollars in improper benefit payment. Among the key findings, despite repeated warnings,
those repeated warnings, the federal government is telling the state of California, you need to put in more safeguards, right?
Okay.
Despite repeated warnings,
I presume they didn't.
EDD did not.
It looks like they haven't put anything in
until months into the pandemic, and it suspended a critical safeguard. The audit goes on to list examples of where suspicious addresses were simply ignored. And
I actually remember this time in 2020. And I remember the headlines coming out of the United States at the time when the lockdowns are going into effect and the whole lot. is most states' benefit system just absolutely collapsed under the pressure. And they just scrambled around the place trying to cobble together a system that was just completely overwhelmed. So, not surprised with a lot of fraud going on at that particular time in 2020 onwards.
The following January, the state auditor came out with a report that laid forward in very precise detail exactly how significant the failures of the Newsom administration were, specifically with their unemployment office known as the EDD. A heading in that audit said, quote, significant weaknesses in EDD's approach to fraud prevention have led to billions of dollars in improper benefit payment. Among the key findings, despite repeated warnings. Yeah,
the federal government warned the state of California, you need to tighten it up a little bit.
Oh, by the way,
a little bit.
I remember this particular time period. This was during the pandemic and the whole lot. That every state got this from the federal government, not just California, because all states were having leakage at this time, because the social, as we know over here, our social welfare system or your state benefits over there system were completely overwhelmed by the amount of people coming into it. Because it was just, everyone was scrambling around the place trying to put together a system and handle all this massive influx of people who are losing their jobs or being laid off or whatever around this time period.
It was all, or for the most part, it was done online, right? So you could hide.
Yeah, but you have to remember. Yeah, I saw the headlines coming out of I've seen the headlines coming out of the United States that time, and it was a system that was completely overwhelmed. Then they tried to cobble together a system, even for the online portals, kept crashing. It was a mess. It's the only way I could describe it. It was a complete mess. Because
for sure.
For the most part, a lot of people in the United States don't claim benefits on a regular basis. But those systems can handle the small numbers that come in up to that point. They were completely overwhelmed. I remember in Texas, in the end, they just literally just told people, you know what, just go down to your local office, because the online portals cannot handle it. So they had to hire on extra staff, and there was a whole thing there in Texas. Every other state had problems with it. And then they were getting pressure, like California, getting pressure from the federal government. The whole thing was just handled very, very badly during this time period.
Right. Well, that's a competency issue, right?
Across the United States, yeah, they were completely overwhelmed. They were very, very. It was a very disorganized mess because they put pressure on a system that was not designed. Because, as I say, you don't have a history of signing on the dole or anything like that.
Right. But I still think that California's complicit with the failure. Like, they should have done at least some percentage better than they did.
By the way, California was bad, but so were the rest of the Union states at the time. They were all scrambling around the place. If you know what I mean, that's what I'm trying to say. California is not alone here.
Right.
And
just the most egregious, of course.
Yeah.
EDD did not bolster its fraud detection efforts until months into the pandemic, and it suspended a critical safeguard. The audit goes on to list examples of where suspicious addresses were simply ignored and the claims process. In one case, more than 1,700 claims came from a single address. From one address, 1,700 claims.
That might have been one of the prisons, actually, where they did that. So, which could look like just an apartment complex listing, labeling, or some Dropbox mail place.
Yeah, with 1,700 people happen to live there.
Yeah, more than that, actually.
Yeah,
a lot of prisons in California have more than 1,700 folks.
And what I can't understand is nobody inside this state office decided to just Google that address.
Yeah.
Copy and paste into Google. Look at Street View, maybe.
Oh, that's not an apartment complex. That's a prison. Yeah,
that's a prison.
Oops.
Yeah. Wow.
And yet, the checks were issued. One of the problems, as mentioned, was there was no cross-match system to cross-match the claims against the prison rolls. So you actually had checks that were being sent to state penitentiaries, to state prisons. Here's a timeline of the aforementioned warnings that actually came from the federal government. Now, this is significant again because the Newsom administration is now claiming somehow that it was California that warned the federal government, when in fact it was exactly the opposite. And other states followed these warnings. California didn't. In April of 2020, the United States Department of Labor sent instructions for implementing the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Program and told states to take reasonable steps to deter and detect fraud, including audits. The following month, in May of 2020, there was a second notice from the U.S. Department of Labor, warning the states to maintain the integrity of the unemployment program. Later that month, in May, the U.S. Department of Labor requested data from California, and the Office of the Inspector General warned California that the state was likely to see at least $1 billion in fraud based on new claims from March and April.
Right, and then the district attorneys in many counties went to the state and said, yeah, it's happening. This is a thing that's happening. The Inspector General, the federal government, internalized organizations, district attorneys and such were telling the state, hey, there's a problem. Like, look at this.
And is any formal investigation now into this?
Oh yeah, it's being investigated for sure.
And it's going to be, have many people been prosecuted yet?
I'm unsure. I don't think anybody yet. I'm unsure.
Right,
I mean,
okay.
Probably some of the more basic things have been handled, but the 1,700 to one address kind of thing might be difficult. That might require more investigation.
Right. Okay.
During this time, the Newsom administration's EDD office had exactly two staff members who were responsible for reviewing suspicious claims. Newsom's EDD also allowed the backdating.
Wait a minute. So, how many people live in California?
Approximately 40 billion. Or 40 million.
40 million, no?
40 million,
okay.
yeah.
And there's two people overseeing fraud claims.
That's what Representative Kiley says.
Two people.
Both of them. And they probably take a lot of vacation.
Wow. Okay.
Until September of that year. So if you were a fraudster, you could simply claim that you had worked a certain number of weeks, previous weeks that had already passed, and there was no verification needed at all. The problem of suspicious addresses got even worse. The audit reports there were 26,000 addresses listed as suspicious, with 500,000, more than 500,000 associated claims. The audit concludes our review illustrates.
Think about that. So 500,000 claims. When you have 40 million people, there is a certain percentage that don't work anymore because they've retired, people who have not yet to work because they haven't reached a working age, and there are those who have some kind of inhibiting
disabilities and so on.
Right. So that's 500,000 claims. That is a very large portion of functional workers of the 40 million people, right?
Yeah.
That is significant, right? So that's just the claims that were suspicious. That percentage of the working population that were suspicious that filed these claims. So it's as if those people didn't exist or something.
Yeah.
Maybe some identity theft or something, but I'm sure he'll get into that.
That EDD continues to pay claims despite having evidence that they are very likely fraudulent. Again, this is a finding, this is a talking point, not from the governor's political adversaries, not from people on social media. This is a report from the nonpartisan California state auditor in January of 2021, saying that our review illustrates that EDD continues to pay claims despite having evidence that they are very likely fraudulent. The audit continues that between March of 2020 and early January of 2021, more than 2.2 million claimants did not satisfactorily answer requests that they provide identity verification.
So that's 2.5 million of the percentage of those who are of working age in the state of California. That's massive, right?
That's crazy numbers.
Those are the claims that are suspect. Of all of the claims, 2.5. Yeah, that's oof. Yeah, it just gets.
Yeah, that's nearly what 3 to 4% of your population. Wow.
Yeah. Well, and the problem, but it's a higher percentage of available workers, right?
Yeah,
it's an even higher percentage of that. So,
in fact, there was another problem that then emerged from this, that people became victims of identity theft. And then they ran into issues like they had to pay taxes on wages they hadn't actually received. As mentioned, the audit also notes that EDD was unprepared to detect and handle the hundreds of millions of dollars in fraudulent claims associated with incarcerated individuals. I mean, how crazy is that? That you had claims coming in from state prisons, and those claims went out hundreds of millions of dollars.
It was a huge scam. Huge scam. So, yeah. So again, the inmates would get money on their books, or they like, I talked to some folks who had inmates come to them with $5,000 and $6,000 checks. Like, what do I do with this check? Right? There's nothing like, I can only have X amount of dollars. So I just send it to my, like, what do I do? You know?
Do I send it down to my family? What? Yeah.
Yeah. They didn't know what to do.
What do they do actually in that case? I presume they get in a check into prison. So do they send a check onto a third party outside the prison?
Checks are not supposed to get to incarcerated persons. If a check goes to an incarcerated person, it's supposed to be deposited on their books, and then any excess over some amount is then paid either in restitution, goes to the state, or if there's something worked out, then it can go to family. It just depends on what kind of monies it is. If it's an inheritance,
but if it's a state check like say it's a state check like this.
Right. So that's a check that comes from EDD that goes to an incarcerated person in the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. So that check should have never gotten to an inmate in the first place. It just should not have physically shown up there, but many did.
Wow.
Yeah.
As the auditor says, as we described throughout this report, EDD's approach to fraud prevention and detection demonstrates the weaknesses caused by its, quote, poor planning and program management. Local media reports at the time substantiated all of these claims, including in publications like the Sacramento Bee and the Los Angeles Times. What's even worse is that the criminals who were purloining our state treasury of these taxpayer funds, in many cases, were using those dollars. I mean, what do you think they're using them for? We talk about waste as in this money is just squandered, but it's actually much worse than that, because the criminals who get these funds, they're not then giving them to charity. They're using them for further criminal activity. One example from the Sacramento Bee is about how these funds were used to buy guns illegally. For example, a report from the Bee reported that multiple fraudulent EDD cards were discovered along with firearms in the hands of convicted felons.
So they get issued an EDD card, and then the money gets put on the card. Right?
Yeah, okay, yeah.
So they found somebody with guns and dope and a ton of these cards, right? It was just like a ton of, in quotes, free money running around the system, right? So not only is the money going squandered, useless, whatever, now the state doesn't have it to build infrastructure or help the constituents of the state. No, it's being used to buy, they're furthering criminal enterprise with it, because that's the function once you get it, right? I'm just going to do more bad things because I got over on the system. So
yeah, they're not suddenly going to turn over a new leaf.
Right. Well, and then they can't buy a house or something really super constructive with it either. It's some hundreds of dollars on individual EDD cards, right? Or thousands.
Yeah. So they're going to do what they do best, just blow it on interests and hobbies. Is that the word I could use?
Guns, Red Bull, and dope. Yep.
Yep. There we go.
Results that law enforcement officials say leads them to one conclusion. criminals are using funds from the growing EDD fraud scandal to buy weapons. Mind you, this was at a time when violent crime rates were soaring in California and far outpaced the rest of the country. Just to give you a couple examples, the Torrance police found that more than 24 people had been arrested in the fall of 2020 for alleged unemployment benefits fraud and identity theft. The 27 suspects used stolen identities to obtain over 130 EDD cards and when they recovered these, the authorities also found $150,000 and 4 handguns, including 2 without serial numbers. The Glendale police, in early 2021, arrested a man who was in possession of a so-called ghost gun, along with drugs and several fraudulent EDD cards, along with ammunition and various drugs and other illicit items. So,
wow.
To summarize, you had the largest fraud of taxpayer dollars likely in the history of the United States. The nonpartisan...
Not just California, right?
Yeah.
In the history of my country, the EDD fraud committed on the state of California is the biggest ever. I guess go big or go home, but that's not...
Yeah.
It's not something to be proud of, obviously, but that's an insane amount of money.
It is absolutely crazy. The fact that they only had 2 people in the whole office investigating it is just mind-boggling for me.
Yeah, pretty much.
There's 2 people. That's wow. And by the way, I'm not blaming these 2 people. It's only because there's no way they could, catch up on all this. It's just wow.
Yeah, there's no way they could have caught up with that. No way at all. So.
No.
State auditor in California, along with nonpartisan prosecutors from throughout California, clearly identified the negligence of the Newsom administration as enabling this fraud to occur, which far outpaced anything that occurred anywhere else in the country. You then had the criminal syndicates and other criminals, more run-of-the-mill criminals, who obtained these funds, use them to spawn further criminal activity that victimized even more Californians. And now, 5 years later, the fraud continues. The administration still hasn't learned its lesson. The same state auditor just found that EDD remains one of 8 high-risk agencies in California, a number that has doubled during the Newsom administration, finding that the EDD continues to allow billions in fraud.
Yeah, they haven't stopped it. And even the state auditor said, hey, you need to fix this, and it doesn't seem like anybody is real excited to fix the problem, right?
No. Wow.
Alongside billions that are being lost in fraud in connection with SNAP benefits, with improper Medi-Cal determinations, not to mention community college fraud, and fraud basically everywhere you look throughout the California government. And so now you have the governor insisting that no, none of this was his fault. California did nothing wrong. He's even made up bogus numbers like he somehow prevented $125 billion in fraud. So the concern is this.
$321 billion is the budget. I don't think that he could have prevented $125 billion in fraud. It just doesn't sound like a real number. Third of the monies?
He's just, I feels like he's just picking the numbers over the top of his head.
Pull them out of a hat. Okay.
Yeah, pretty much.
If the governor and his administration are unwilling to admit any responsibility whatsoever, despite the clearly established evidence of their responsibility, how can we expect this problem to ever be fixed? I will tell you, I am working in a bipartisan way here in Congress to bring accountability for the vast fraud that continues to take place in California so that our tax dollars do not have to see their hard-earned money going to criminals and can finally start getting a reasonable return on their investment in our state government.
Wow.
Well, yeah, that's what you're looking for, right? Super important.
Yeah.
That's the way you're going to want to do that. So.
And who's looking likely to be your next state governor?
Probably Steve Hilton.
Okay. And what's he like?
He's a Republican, actually, which is strange. He's at 16 to 17%. There's a primary, I believe, mid-year, and then November's the election for governor. And Gavin Newsom can't run, so he's probably gonna have to run for president or something, you know.
Yeah, he looks like that's what. Well, obviously, I was saying that before. That Newsom definitely looks like he's going for the presidency. Either I don't know if it's going to be for the next run or the run after, but he's definitely gearing up for some big race.
Right.
But who'll be up against him from the Democratic side, I presume?
Probably Elizabeth Warren.
Ooh,
I don't think Bernie Sanders is up for it.
No.
But yeah, there's going to be some others. But it was all the second and third runners behind, or that were in front of Kamala Harris before she was put into the position to run. For president.
As I said, that was an interesting campaign. She was trying to run in less than 100 days.
Well, the other thing was that Tim Walz, her running partner, generated more money in one day for a campaign than any other politician had ever raised in one day, which was pretty interesting too.
Yeah, be honest, he wasn't a bad guy either. He was put in a very difficult position as well. He was just kind of shoved in there as well.
And you could see about him being a good guy. Any politician at that level.
Yeah, well, don't get me wrong, all politicians lie. But I'm just saying that he was kind of very naive going into it. And from day one, he was just absolutely overwhelmed. You could see it a mile away.
Yeah, well, he just didn't interview well either. And yeah, the whole we'll tell you our policies when you elect us wasn't going to work for the American people.
No, it wasn't. So, like, as I said, they had less than 100 days to win that. They had a snowball chance in hell of winning in 100 days, no matter who they were. There's no way you'll win a presidential election in the United States in less than 100 days of campaign.
Oh, for sure.
No, not a hope. And it will be interesting to see what Newsom does after California. Because I don't see him getting a Democratic nomination somehow. I just have that feeling he won't get it.
Well, if a Democrat does get elected, he might end up in a cabinet position.
You think so?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, maybe.
Seems reasonable, right?
Well, I think he has bigger plans than that, though. He definitely has
a bigger.
I don't think he wants to sit in the side chair. You know what I mean? I think he wants to sit in the big chair.
He wants to drive the big choo-choo train.
Yes, he doesn't. He doesn't want to sit in the back of the bus. Put that with you.
Got it. All right, so the rest of this video just covers more specifics of the fraud and the investigation type stuff. So we'll put a link to the video and some information about Representative Kiley. I think it's good.
Yeah, he's actually quite an interesting dude, actually.
I
must say, he's actually quite a solid guy. He has all his ducks in a row, as they say. He doesn't stand up there and speak off the cuff.
Well, he doesn't give you the guff. And he's a Republican rep in the state of California, which...
Yeah.
Wow.
Which is as rare as a unicorn, really, isn't it?
Pretty much. So, anyway, but yeah, we'll put some links in the description for you guys. But I think exposing fraud on this scale is super important, so we can, at least his constituents in our own areas, pay a little more attention.
We had massive fraud over here as well during the pandemic.
No, you didn't. Come on, Ireland.
Oh yeah, we had a lot of fraud. Well, most of it's been clawed back now, but a lot of fraud.
Nice. All right, for Patrick McCallum, I am Alex Johansson. We are the A&P Gents. Like, subscribe, and help us beat the algorithm. We are out.